Hi, and welcome to Brainstorm Changemakers by Timo. In this series, we're talking to activists, experts, and movers who are shaking things up in the neurodivergent space. My name is Vanessa. I'm the head of brand communications at Timo. Timo is a Denmark-based startup that is on a mission to transform planning and time management for neurodivergent people worldwide. Today, we're talking to Johan Brand. Johan is a tech entrepreneur, investor, and advocate for neurodiversity. He's the co-founder of We Are Human and Kahoot, one of the world's fastest growing learning brands with millions of users. Johan, it's great to have you on Changemaker. Thank you for making the time. I just wanted to ask you, I know you're traveling a lot, you're all over the world. Where are you joining us from today?
Actually at home.
At home, in Oslo, right? Norway.
In Oslo. I was almost going to join you from my boat, which I also use as an office, but it ended up being from home.
Okay, wonderful. So today we'll touch a bit on your journey as an entrepreneur with dyslexia and ADHD and how you took this unique profile to forge a career in tech. But I want to take a bit of a step back and put your current success in context. So take us a little bit back to how it all started. You grew up in Oslo, Norway, and you struggled with schooling, largely because academia is based on writing and you have a more conceptual way of learning, and that didn't fit into these parameters. Do you want to tell us a little bit about it and what impact it had on you?
Yeah, I guess I'm lucky because my profile is in a way that means I have the ability to find my own way of learning and being self-aware, start from outside. So I think that's one thing that's helped me looking back the choices I made. So for me, it was two things. I was a very small person and I was small of growth when I was growing up. So I was probably the smallest guy coming into school. And when you're in Norway, the average person is quite tall here. So that also affected me in terms of my personality. So I was quite timid. I didn't want to be seen. I avoided being on stage. Because of comments, didn't want to play instruments, didn't want to sing, didn't want to dance. So in many ways, being a kinesthetic learner, being very much like this also affected me in my personality. And also slow with learning languages. In Norway, you're early on learning English, which for me was important because my father is half English in the family. So early on, the way my makeup was a bit of a challenge. And you're not that self-aware in, first grade. But nobody was pointing out early on that he's slow or anything. But as the early days was coming on, people thought I was a bit lazy, unconcentrated. Because of writing was going slow, they put me on writing courses to write more pretty because they thought it was about writing pretty. That was neat.
And you were very restless then?
Yeah, so I was restless and I was having the most amazing teacher who saw me. I didn't have a problem learning. She saw that. I had no problem learning, the context and so on. The issue for them was that I wasn't sitting still. I was being distracted. So she gave me the ability to, go and pick up the milk for the lunch and take an extra round around the building. It's always used an example.
Yeah. And at the time, I guess sort of dyslexia or ADHD were not sort of in the conversation, right? People were not really aware that much.
No, because the way it affected me is not the same way for my sister, which is different because I wasn't struggling with reading. So I wasn't struggling with input, verbal input, reading was absolutely no problem. Expressing myself was no problem. Picking up new skills was no problem. So I was more seen as someone who gave up quickly, someone who was unconcentrated, a bit rough on edges.
Bored quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, but it did drive me for a lot of frustration. Right, I was frustrated. I didn't fit into the scheduling. I didn't fit into what's expected of you. Sitting, doing homework, repetition, because I knew it straight away. It was very weird to have to repeat something when you already had it. That puts you in these habits. So that became a problem. So I got very kind of like this. So I actually chose myself when I was in the last year of when you're sixth grade to go abroad to a boarding school in England for half a semester. And there I was completely obnoxious. I really didn't work into the British very strict systems. And then I got actually quite a lot of trouble.
Okay. But it did help you. It made a difference for you personally. Yeah.
I learned the language because you learn it by doing. I got challenged. I really grew. I was being able to be myself. And I came back to seventh grade, youth, what's it called? Middle school.
Yeah.
Being more confident, more independent, more knowing myself.
I wanted to say that I was struck by some interviews I saw with you about how you were able to advocate for yourself and for your needs at an early age, before even having a diagnosis or anything, this decision to say, I'm going to England, or then later you were studying economics and you just decided this is not for me, you quit. and you start art school, which again, it's a radical change of direction. I was wondering where did you take the confidence or the awareness to make these decisions? I mean, did you have any role models at the time, or is it family impact? You mentioned your sister, or is it something, some internal drive that you just had?
It's a combination. I mean, I was made aware early on because my sister before me went away for a whole year, and it was like in my family, and this boarding school is the opposite of fancy. It was a bit like Boy by Roald Dahl. It was a really rough and tough school.
Okay.
So people don't know, but yeah, it's a boarding school.
It's not Harry Potter style.
Yeah, so I was exposed to it through my sister. It was in my family. It was a bit like, if you want to go, you do it. I probably did it quite early, so I just made a choice. I don't know. I later on realized I have this metacognitive ability to see myself from outside and learn how I learn. So it was at that point, it's a conscious decision without really understanding why.
Okay.
I did the same going to high school. I refused to start high school where my friends were going. I only had one high school. It was a creative high school where they had ballet. Even though I wanted to do physics and stuff, I wanted to go to school where it was creative. It was very different. So it was that school or not going to high school, which is also quite radical in Norway. It's expected to go all the way through. Yeah. And after 1 year, I decided to go and be an AFS exchange student. Again, I knew it was possible to be it, but I chose it straight away. I was like, I'm done with this. I'm going to go away.
But you always had the support of your family then.
Yeah, so my family always support you, right? That's the benefit of being from an affluent side of the family, but also actually being so good in America that I graduated there, could go into college, but I chose to come back and do 2 more years in high school in Norway, and actually graduated after my peers was also very conscious, knowing that I needed more schooling. The American school system wasn't good enough. The bar was too low. So being extremely self-aware is probably what I'm very proud of, that I'm able to kind of know where the bar is and where I can get more knowledge.
That's amazing. How did actually then learning that you have dyslexia and then later that you have ADHD, how did that affect you? Did it change anything, or was it just confirming sort of what you already realized, that you learn differently, you need a different learning system?
So this was at high school. I was a teacher. She used to teach police students. She really favored creative people. She was quite hard on my girlfriend, who was very analytical. So it's also like she was a great teacher, but only for people like me. And she sent me down to this diagnosis and said, there's something I need to figure out about you, because you write extremely good short text and they're very intelligent and they're kind of way above your level. But you're very unstructured, and there's a lot of stuff going on with the writing, but particularly you reading out is very weird, because you read the right content, but it's not the way it's in the book. So that's why I got to this diagnosis, and they figured it out, and it made sense. But it was 2 things they told me: you have learning difficulties and brain damage. And
that's what they told you?
Yeah, it's like, I don't have learning difficulties. Just like dyslexia is learning difficulties. I was like,
look, brain damage. Okay. I'm sure they don't say that anymore.
It's really weird to tell something like this. And
yes,
but it did affect me, because when someone tells you, I mean, it's true. I have a disconnect between the verbal and the written sensor in my brain. So if you tell me something verbally I haven't seen, I can't write it. And I can't, when I'm reading, I can't straight away translate it. I have to kind of go through a little bit of a connection in my brain. But what it made me was a bit like, sorry, the word, the system, this is, don't tell me these things, because I didn't recognize myself in that box.
Yeah. But at the same time, they told you this, but at the same time, this was the teacher who really backed you up and who thought.
Yeah, so she sent me this thing, and I came back, and she's like, look, I want to give you the top grades, but your spelling doesn't allow me to do it, but I can do it in certain places,
Yeah.
And I had a German teacher who made a deal with me, saying, look, yeah, you don't have to do homework. You don't have to come up with the tests. This is the grade I think you'll be able to achieve, and you have it as long as you just keep on doing your stuff.
I'm hearing this. I'm just wondering if this is also something like this flexibility on the teacher side, if this is something particular to Norway. I can imagine that would not have happened in some other cultures. And we're going to talk a bit more about Norway and the culture later. But is that your impression?
Yeah, I mean, it has changed now, but I was not that long. It was a reform in 1994, so which was a couple of years before I went into high school. That said, the students have responsibility for their own learning. Did empower you as a student. It means that back then I could hack the system. I could actually, I did also legal things like eradicating my what's it called, when I wasn't at school, I changed the actual.
Right. Your attendance.
Yeah, attendance, which you can't do anymore. But the teacher's a bit like, well, your grades are good, so why am I going to fail you just because you don't come to school, because you don't fit into the system? Same happened when I came back. Now it's become so much more strict, and you actually drop out if you have more than 10%. And so my drive at the moment is to get the politicians to understand, the more rigor they're putting in, the worse it is for those who need to be able to tailor schooling for themselves.
And who don't fit into that system. Yeah.
And it's a difference between those who drop out because of attendance not going in, which is more social issues, versus those who learn differently and can't actually turn on that one, and they can't really see the difference. So it was different then than now.
Okay, but that was good for you because you did get some
Extremely
support
good
there, even
I would have dropped out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go on to talk a bit about Kahoot and this educational platform that is really reshaping the way millions of people are learning worldwide. And you are the co-founder. You've stepped away a little bit now, but I'm thinking about all of you, what you've just said, and your own challenges with learning and a very sort of an educational system that I think you called it binary at some point as well. How did all of the struggles and all of the learnings that you took away from your own experience, how did that feed into the concept of Kahoot?
Everyone who's been part of founding or shaping it has given it a color, which means why it also fits such a diverse group of learners and actually fits into the school system, even though it breaks every single rule. For me, and being kind of the driver of the vision and a lot of things was because of I was neurodiverse. Kahoot is made for neurodiverse. It's got inclusive design strategy, means it's designed for the outcasts to be the best for everyone, because we know the outcasts actually challenges is something that everyone to some degree have, and it will improve for everyone, particularly because we have a global issue with attendance that nothing to do with neurodiversity, has to do with not finding school interesting.
Yeah.
So it fed in massively. And also because I've gone to school in the Nordic school system, the British school system, and American school system. I knew what was needed in the different ones. I could see the comparison and what I thought was best and worse. So in America, I came, when I got Fs in English and, was struggling in the beginning. And then I ended up being one of the best students in English, even though I had dyslexia, not my native language, because it's easy to hack with notes and the way the system, multiple choice, all that. So I had an immensely good average. I was above my, thing, blah, blah, blah. So then I was like, okay, why can you hack the system in the US? And also looking at my peers, why are they falling behind? And also the adoption of technology, freedom of the teachers, but also how short they stand in work. So for me, it was a way of understanding the global education system. And also, by the way, the British one is very much adapted in Turkey, in the Asia and so.
I know, yeah. My daughter was in school in Spain, and it was a Cambridge curriculum, so it's all over the world. Yes.
So for me, it was feeding in, and luckily being exposed to all of this, and being able to kind of understand also this strategy that also Jamie was part of the inclusive design strategy that makes it very flexible, and it designs for an extremely broad audience. And then another thing we learned about, same happened to me, when the guy or the girl in the back of the classroom comes in the front for the right reason. It's inspiring for everyone. It's inspiring when the troublemaker attends or shows they're doing well, or the kid with dyslexia or the kid with autism comes and shows what they can do, and everyone is included. Because often what happens is you have those who attend and are engaged and are disengaged, and when the disengaged engages, it pulls everyone along, and it's very inspiring. And a big part of Kahoot, which we realized, I saw myself, was being seen. Why did I do well at school? The teachers saw me. It was eye contact, right? So Kahoot is very much about looking up, getting eye contact with your peers and with your teacher.
Yes, and Kahoot is giving that visibility.
Yeah, and being able to kinesthetic, to be audiovisual, right? To be able to do a bit on the phone, to be able to do all those things, attention ones that,
Was there, I wonder, when you were fundraising for Kahoot or raising funds or speaking to investors, partners, was there a lot of resistance to the idea, or was there already sort of this moment where people were like, yes, this is what we need? Or was it like, this is not going to work? It comes from gaming. We're not, it's not serious. What was the reaction?
Oh man, everything. I was so surprised that the Serious Player organization was completely saying it's not a game, and on the other side, people saying it's too much of a game. It's game-based. So it's based on the work from, what's his name? Is it Johan Brand, who wrote a book called Play, where I spent a lot of time when I worked on play personalities, where I disagreed with the idea that we have 8 play personalities that you're fixed in. So my research showed that you change in and out of them depending on context. So that's a big part of Kahoot, to show that you can do different things. You can be a creator, you can be a player, you can be many things, which a lot of other game-based and programs, particularly games outside of education, recognized. And then when you mentioned Cambridge, is kind of funny because I pitched the idea, or I was asked by Sherry Coutu when Silicon Valley was coming to UK. We went to Cambridge. I was asked during this massive dinner to stand on a chair and talk about it.
So just for context, how old were you then?
This was when I was working. So I was probably about 20. So I was about 29.
Okay. Yeah.
So this is,
Yeah.
into my career, or 30, something like that. But still, it's quite intimidating to stand on a chair in front of all these scholars, really famous entrepreneurs, and say, I'm doing this thing. And I was shut down, right? But then entrepreneurs who were there, who exactly, they inherently saw that, no, I think this can work, blah, blah, blah. And it was really kind of cool to first step up and the professors shoot you down. And as I'm being shot down, then they hear the arguments, the entrepreneur starts going, hang on. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But when teachers and students start going, this is profound for us. They saw the behavior changes. Kids were allowed to stand on chairs, all those things. Then, so you got both. And for long, still people talk negative about Kahoot, or they talk about the very basic level of it, not understanding the pedagogical models. So it's always going to be like this. Mobile phone in the classroom, horrible, right?
Yeah.
Music.
Yeah. No technology. Technology is bad.
Yeah.
But okay, so it took off. It became this huge success. I wanted to talk a little bit about your career in tech as a neurodivergent person and entrepreneur. I mean, it's not exactly known for being a hotbed for self-care. And entrepreneurship is also frequently associated with these norms of what they call toxic masculinity, winning at all costs, stoicism, not admitting you're wrong, relentless work. I'm wondering, how did you navigate this environment? I mean, also you were in art school, right? You were there for a reason. How did you navigate this environment? And do you feel a responsibility to model a different kind of masculinity entrepreneurship?
Definitely. So it was easier for me to make the choices I made because you're male. And it's, even though there was a lot of expectations and I couldn't really define after my high school what I wanted to do. So my mom said, look, and my dad said, look, and your financial studies, economic studies is always something you'll need. So do it. And since I couldn't really argue for anything else, I can expect this. I went to university. I lasted one semester. I ended up crashing into bed, staying there for 2 weeks. But I also said to my dad, look, I'm going to start my own company because that's how I'm going to learn business.
Sorry to butt in, but I'm just curious. Did anybody around you start companies or start a business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. Yes, I come from a family where my uncle built Royal Caribbean Cruise Line. My other uncle created a roll of ships.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of creative people. So definitely being an entrepreneur.
Having that modeled somewhere. Yeah. Sorry for sidetrack.
I was reading up on Steve Jobs. I was, entrepreneurship was a big part of what I saw myself becoming.
Yes. Okay. But then you entered this tech world, and was that a sort of challenge to adjust to? Did you have to adjust, or did you just decide, I will do this my way? I'm a different kind of entrepreneur. I model a different kind of masculinity.
Well, in the beginning, I wasn't so self-aware. So when I was doing this tech company, also keep in mind, when I chose to go for art, I was aware of my learning style. And I felt art school was probably the educational system that wasn't affected by the Industrial Revolution. You were able to educate you for the right reasons. And I was very expressive. I knew that I'd taken this test. I knew that visual communication stuff was very much for me. I knew that I wanted to change people. So that's also why I chose art school. And I run my own business while at art school. I was running a little tech company doing work for other big businesses. So I was doing a parallel, but I didn't fit into art school because, as the other kids said, you don't have holes in your clothes. I wasn't either. And it was very female oriented, blood on the wall, menstruation, So there, being a white male Christian from, then you were actually the odd one out.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting one. But what I realized going into the tech world afterwards was, it was very, it's extremely competitive. It's very male dominated. It's very technical. It's very much solutions and oriented. And it didn't fit me. And this is why I got aware. Like, I worked better with having a diverse team with women because I felt like I was being heard. So I actually started very early in my career in London to go to meetings like business, women in business, because I wanted to hire women.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah.
Was 2 males in one of those meetings. Well, mostly 2 males, me and an older guy. And I got a bit shocked because the women wasn't wondering how men could help them and so on. It was actually internal fighting. So I got a little bit like, it wasn't really good. And I was trying to say, like, I want women around me because it fits me the way I am, also because of the way my value system and so on. So from then on, it's been a big thing for me. Call it selfishly as well,
Yeah.
and particularly through the Kahoot career, it's been a problem. This masculinity, this way of being, what expectations, you're talking about the toxicity, because of lack of structure, being the way we are, and not necessarily having the limits and self-structure in terms of how do you operate. Yeah, you get burnt out, you go all those things. and you're very sensitive to other people's feedback and so on. So being in an environment which is so hard, you know, because you have such a mix, particularly on the VC side, they're so hard. They expect so much of you. They're pushing. And if you can't really structure yourself and say no, you get pushed out, and they don't provide you with a structure. They don't have an empathetic model to pick you up. And
so how do you thrive? How did you?
Well, I thrived and then stopped thriving. One of the reasons I left Kahoot was because I saw the problem in education with the ocean not being present. So that was a big one. I did not like the working structure. I did not like the way I was being treated. Being a CEO, what I valued, got more and more into trouble. Okay. You get picked on. You know, you basically feel like you're shit.
Yeah. Okay.
So I also left Kahoot one because of that reason.
Okay. So that was part of why you walked away there. Okay. Yeah. I'm wondering, is there, you know, you have some in the tech world at the same time, you have these sort of figures who are very prominent and obvious, like, for example, Elon Musk, who are, you know, neurodivergent. But is there a larger conversation about neurodiversity in tech and especially neurodiverse talent and how to support and accommodate that kind of talent?
It is, and I'm proud to be part of like the generation and of entrepreneurs bringing it to the agenda and pointing at it yourself in a more constructive way. I felt in a little bit like the crazy ones. I mean, you know, Richard Branson being dyslexic and open about it was very important. But I've been sitting in meetings in London where they talk shit about things, saying like he shouldn't do well because of dyslexia. As is like he's slightly stupid. Being a leader in a business yourself, I was like, I'm not going to tell them. I'm not going to tell them before I'm at a level where I can tell them.
Okay, so you haven't early in your career disclosed?
No, not at all. I didn't disclose being dyslexic before one of the largest tabloid newspaper in Norway did it on the front page, completely without my agreement.
Without your agreement? Oh my God!
They interviewed me for something else, and just for context, I talked about dyslexia, and they put it on the front. But then I was like, I'm going to own it, and I talk about it my superpower, and I had to kind of flip it around because then all of a sudden people start judging you, right? And they're going like, oh, it can't be Johan who then was leading this because he's dyslexia, and they talk you down. So then I was like, with this.
So that's why you then disclosed it. So before that, it was just you felt that the cost of disclosing is too high in terms of how
so people around me knew. It was known within the business and so it was like hidden, but it wasn't something I was going out, you know, so people knew it. I don't think anyone on my board knew it.
Okay, interesting,
so I just talked more about being creative. And I think that to your question, I think the debate still is a bit within certain segments of entrepreneurship. It's about the founders who talk about it, but it's still a parallel discussion. I will also say the more kind of, because the entrepreneur world isn't this one thing. It's a lot of segments of things, right? Even though it's a world full of parallel stuff. So I feel, but it's getting more and more. But also investors start talking about, particularly entrepreneurs becoming investors. You have a more diverse investor base who is also themselves neurodiverse and getting more aware of it. I think just within creativity, it's more discussion about, and innovation is more discussion about neurodiversity, even within other companies, because you're over-indexing on it. People recognize it. So, but unfortunately, it's not a wider debate. It's more a bubble debate.
Okay, interesting. And so in the tech world, you're saying it's kind of still sort of just being discussed in the more innovation, creative-driven sectors, but not maybe in the more standard like software development and
so it's a more a parallel discussion. And the thing is, like, then people are not maximizing and understanding the opportunity within neurodiverse people, particularly in this creativity, which I would say that entrepreneurship who's good at adapting and know they need it, they could do it much better because there's such a high percentage of entrepreneurs and early employees in entrepreneurship companies being neurodivergent.
Exactly. And that brings me a little bit back to Norway and the way you emphasize in your public speaking and also in how Norway or the Norwegian culture has influenced you, that, you know, Norwegian culture informs a different way of doing business. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about what, in your opinion, sets Norwegian startups and ventures apart or can set them apart.
Yeah, I actually caught my business partner, Jamie, who are British, who we built up our careers out of the UK, who has invested into the Nordics predominantly. So he feel the Nordics, and probably Norwegian, Norway the most, is that it's very value driven. It's very conscious. And sometimes then on the negative is maybe not being so growth oriented, and, you know, a lot of other stuff. That doesn't mean all business in Norway is like this. There are segments of Norwegian business extremely kind of profitable, you know, hard driven, but there is part of society, a very value driven society, a very naive society.
Naive because they are too optimistic or they're not realistic about the challenges?
Naive in terms of meeting other people and their extreme lack of, like, that they believe too much in the good in people, to put it that way, that they don't want to get exploited. Blue-eyed, as we say. Yeah. So it's a bit of in one way, Norwegians, if you go in the oil sector, are impressive engineers and, hard negotiators. But, that's a culture learned. But I think in more wide entrepreneurship here, people are a little bit naive that other people are looking out for them.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe something that is actually a little bit the case in the Nordics in general.
And also remember that Norway is also an extremely monoculture. So that's also why I left early on. It is also weird to say, but like when I grew up, it was lawyers, economists, and engineers who run companies. That creates an extremely monoculture. So being creative, you could not have a leadership position. You could in the UK. I saw people, that's where I was growing, because I could see what I am, the way I want to be. I can be a leader there. I can build businesses. In Norway, there was no creative companies. Yeah, you had advertising and so on, but it's very different.
Yeah, creative agencies, but also not people.
Norway still is a very kind of industrial economy, which means it's a problem for startups. It's a problem for creative companies. It's a problem to be creative and come into large companies because it's extremely traditional industrial thinking.
Okay. But you see value in the value-driven aspect of it, though, is making a difference in your opinion. And if you sort of pair it rightly with the growth-oriented approach, then you would probably have a sort of competitive advantage in Norwegian.
Yeah. Because the whole city is put together that way. And there is this triangle cooperation between the industry, the work association, and the government, which means quite well balanced. That's why we have such a good system. People want to pay taxes to a certain level. People, are looked after. You can drop out of work and be looked after and so on.
Yeah.
So there's a duality to that makes people. And I think the industrial country always also have been value driven as much as to other places.
Yes. That's correct. In terms of awareness in Norway around neurodiversity, is there a conversation happening there in the workplaces? And are you very much part of that conversation?
Yeah, I feel like I've been a big driver of it, lifted out of where it was. To the level where we challenged, military to where they don't let kids in because what if we give them a gun, they could shoot someone. One of the main doctors in the military, she challenged them saying, God, what the hell's going on here? And also I'm invested into special soldiers who have dyslexia. I've just not been, I know people at the highest level in the military, and sorry, not dyslexia, ADHD kids. I know people at the highest level who are neurodivergent, but it's not publicly known. And people who diagnose saying, do you want to go to the military? I'm not going to diagnose you. Then you have to just fight school. If you don't want to go to the military, I can diagnose you because you won't get in. So that has changed. Not everyone should go in, but it's changed the way it is. But the debate has changed to the level where I'm obsessed about the language. In my opinion, that's the same with Kahoot, where we did this, is language is one of the core things how we program society, the way we talk about stuff. So moving away from diagnosis in a normal language, talking about people having ADHD, you are dyslexic, right? You are kind of an ADHD person. You are an autist. It's part of who you are. It's not something that you can get sick because of it, because it's too prominent. You can get sick of it because you don't fit in. So it's also understanding the difference between being, functionally stopped by it, or that is actually the system that makes you sick as a consequence. So I've been part of that debate, and it's been a lot of newspapers about it. And what happens? Those with a different view then also are more public about it. And that's good, because then you start seeing the dissonance, and you can start actually talking against and making it more aware. So there is, and it's been so obvious, because up until recently, when I talked about my neurodivergent, I never said it. I just talked about my behaviors. I got interviewed in profile interviews, and I talked about 16 streams of thinking in my head. I don't know the alphabet yet. I'm writing, super well, all those things. So people who diagnose it, they're like, okay, obviously has it. But in a business life, people say, why do you want to portray yourself like an idiot? And I'm like, how does it make me an idiot?
I'm really surprised at the language. Is that do you see a difference between the US and Europe? Because I feel like Europe is kind of lagging the US and UK in language. I cannot really imagine that kind of language being okay in a sort of corporate context or anywhere. So I'm assuming that's sort of very Europe focused.
Yeah, it definitely is. And a lot of the articles that has been here is translated articles from the US and the UK, then published in the newspapers here. So last year was a big neurodivergent, kind of neurodiverse year. It was a lot of articles. I was doing interviews in the main newspapers like the BBC of Norway, NRK, and also the business paper. Particularly the business papers were doing the counter view, right? Obviously. And so it's interesting. And then the debate now, I feel like it's been more cemented a little bit, but it's a long way to go.
Okay. So you're working also on policy, like working with politicians?
I'm trying to, through my voice, to help how people change, how they look at it, because the way the politicians are programming school is not good for neurodiverse people.
What about your own companies? You stepped away from Kahoot. You have now We Are Human that you've been running for several years. That's also investing in startups. Do you have policies there in place? How do you approach neurodiversity in your own companies?
Yeah, it's kind of important to say that We Are Human was created to create companies like Kahoot. So we created it before Kahoot.
Okay.
We Are Human to be a vehicle to be able to develop what became Kahoot. Because we worked in a tech and advertising communication place in the UK, and I was particularly inspired by the BBC doing, massive games for them. But our job was to fight computer literacy. The reason for doing the game was entertainment, but through the game, we're going to fight computer literacy and really help people. So when we created We Are Human, we took a lead from Jan Gehl, the famous architect who designed Copenhagen and so on, who talks about designing for the person between the buildings. We Are Human is to design for the person between technology and institution and society. So that was the policy of We Are Human. So we started working with Royal College of Art and the Helen Hamlin Center, who has kind of developed inclusive design, and the Norwegian Design Council, who also been their partner in it. And so we start working with them, and we really developed in these tools and understanding of inclusive design. That guided us on the Kahoot journey. And then afterwards, we decided that, of course, with the profit that we made out of Kahoot, and one of the reasons to leave early was that we wanted to start doing more, apply our knowledge. So this was the point. We wanted to invest into the parts of society that I kind of always said is in the outcast, you'll find the next Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. Yeah. Obviously, statistically, we know they're coming from there, but it wasn't obvious to a lot of people. So as investors, it was and entrepreneurs, one of our opportunities. We also knew at the beginning we're going to have to accept a high failure rate of our money. So it's almost like we committed the money through Founders Pledge, knowing that money is going to get lost, but it's going to build a more fertile ground and then top. And that's same as Kahoot. We didn't build Kahoot to get rich. We built Kahoot to change the system.
Some of those Norwegian values right there.
Yeah. And I said to people, people talk about, are you going to save your money for pensions? Well, for me, Kahoot is my pension, because you can be a gazillionaire, but it's still not going to be enough money to help you out with your diseases and change the system. You need this. You need a government and society to look after you. So it's much better to empower society than just accumulating wealth for yourself. So it's more of and I call this now systemic thinking. And a lot of people talk about this. So what we do in We Are Human, the policies, is that we are ecosystemic investors, and we judge ourselves on return on learning. So we invest where we learn, and we share the learning. We have a return on investment, and then we analyze our ecosystemic approach. So now we work with investors in developing alignment tools, processes so that people can be aligned. So if your values are these, right, to change, on impact on SDGs, so we're talking about, getting people more innovative, diverse, you need these alignment tools and systems. So the way we choose and what we choose to work on, invest into and develop ourselves, the companies, the funds, comes from this policy of looking at the outsiders, drawing the best. Yeah. Getting kids to be excited about school, seeing social value. Yeah.
And just to close up, maybe just a question about Entrepreneurship One, which is your latest venture, I believe. And I know you just talked about how you were trying to change the conversation around neurodiversity. What other social impact are you looking for through Entrepreneurship One, or what is it about?
Yeah, so when we started We Are Human, we picked education and health as the two places we felt like we could do the best impact in terms of where we were. Kahoot being education. Entrepreneurship was the thing I started leaving Kahoot. So the reasons I started, the main business reason was that the ocean wasn't part of the conversation in schools. It was kind of on the Paris Agreement. It was not really there before in the end. So I looked at Jacques Cousteau, the guy who kind of inspired the whole modern environmental awareness, who created the Rio conference, who created the diving mask, all this stuff. And there was French a movie by Wes Anderson called Life Aquatic. It was a homage to him. I was like, what if I create a company that's homage to Life Aquatic, it's homage to Jacques Cousteau? And it's kind of like the business plan is a movie unfolding in real life, and we're characters. Going back to how do you engage the broader society? How do you engage people who are falling out? How do you take people to do things they could never done before? So it's a diverse and new way of creating a company to engage everyone. And my philosophy was, if I can get entrepreneurs, politicians, and other people to meet on boats in the ocean, maybe some of them will fall in love with the ocean and do work. Maybe some of them will be more aware, or maybe some of them will just fall in love with the idea of entrepreneurship and diversity and why we're doing what we're doing, right? So I was then using my repertoire. And particularly, we focused on collaborations with institutions who work with kids who are falling out of school system. So we're working with Christian Radich, which is a large tall ship in Norway, who has a program called Windjammers, which are for kids on the way to falling out of the system. And so we bought an island, we have boats, and we're doing all this work with them, but also then with businesses.
So it's like floating learning, basically.
Yeah, we're getting them to the island, we're getting them to jump into the water. I've got executives in one of Norway's largest companies to jump into the water and figure out he can eat the seaweed straight out of his hand, right? To be around kids who are falling out, to show the kids that how short it is to have a network, because that's what I got, right? I inherited a network. Yeah. I inherited the exposure to it's possible. Most kids don't do that, right? They think it's for someone else.
I wish you all the best with Entrepreneurship One and all your other ventures. And thank you so much for joining us today here at Timo. We appreciate your time, Johan. Thank you for joining, and stay tuned for more interviews in this series. If you have a suggestion for a guest we should be speaking to, DM us, we're at Timo App, or send us an email at hello@timo.tk. You can follow Johan's work at wearehuman.cc or follow him on LinkedIn. Thank you for today, and see you next time.